The following program is presented by Ride the Wave Media. Subscribe to our YouTube channel for all our videos at Ride the Wave Media Podcast. Enjoy the program.
We are those guys. We hope to be your guys, bringing you the latest from the National Football League. This is our rapid reaction Thursday night edition. The Philadelphia Eagles just took care of the Washington Commanders 26-18. And here to break it down with me, as always, Nick Ferguson, former NFL safety, 10 years in the league, most notably with the Denver Broncos. And it feels like, Nick, we've been doing pods for 10 years together. What's going on, my man?
What's good, man? What is happening?
We've got, a battle of NFC supremacy. The NFC East is now a 3-game lead with the Eagles over the Commanders. And really, you talk about Saquon Barkley, 146 rushing yards and 2 TDs, lifting that offense when Jalen Hurts was inaccurate, I'd say the least. But nonetheless, it's the defense that really made a difference that we're going to get into quite a bit because of your familiarity with their defensive play caller. But Nick, overall, when you look at the Eagles and Commanders, it was a one-score game, but just looking at those two numbers alone, the Eagles, to me, look like they're in a different stratosphere than the Commanders.
Well, they may look like they are in a different stratosphere because of how the game finished, but the game didn't really start that way for the Eagles, and they were not flying high as both Washington and the Eagles kind of struggled to get things going. It wasn't until that fourth quarter, let's be totally honest, that there was this offensive explosion. Saquon Barkley, 26 carries, 146 yards, and 2 sensational touchdowns. I mean, he was running around once he scored like he was a little kid and he was having fun. Philly would do that for you. I guess they call it the city of brotherly love for a reason, but he wasn't doing that with the New York Giants, running around like he was having fun. But it was great to see the Eagles finally poured on at the end. But this is a team, the Philadelphia Eagles, that once again, they start so slow. So if they come up against another team that's able to get going offensively early, that now puts the Eagles behind, the scoring chart. And I don't think that they have enough in the tank to kind of overcome a team that can put 24, 21, 28 points on them.
No, especially with how that Eagles defense was. I will note that battle of the trenches on both sides of the football, certainly in favor of the Philadelphia Eagles. Nick, if you had to guess, right, this offense as a whole, 228 rushing yards. You mentioned a $146 coming from Saquon. Jalen Hurts had 40 yards. And Kenneth Gainwell, very efficient, 4 carries, 43 yards. So again, almost 230 yards rushing. How many yards before contact do you think those rushers had for the Eagles?
Probably, say, before contact.
Before contact, right? And I'll give you a hint.
I would say about 2.5 to 4 yards.
Right. The raw number. So Saquon's back-to-back touchdowns, he was untouched for both. 150 rushing yards before contact this Eagles team had tonight. So the addition, or I should say, getting Jordan Mailata at left tackle coming off IR was a huge, huge piece of that offensive line, just bullying what is and has been a very capable and quality defensive line that has been playing really well with Dan Quinn's tutelage as head coach. Now, defending the run, they're better at rushing the passer. They came in, I believe it was 29th in terms of allowing yards before contact, whereas the Eagles just are completely punishing. So on that side of the football, they were able to establish the ground game. Later on, as you mentioned, and make up for the fact that they were missing kicks, Jalen Hurts missing throws. And, for a moment there, when you enter that blue medical tent being evaluated for a concussion, that could be the Eagles' season on the line right there. Instead, they're 8-2, just trailing Detroit in the NFC standings. And really, Nick, I want to get to this side of it. I've kind of teased it a couple of times now, but the effort that defense had done, limiting the outside pass catchers, the wide receivers had a total of 4 catches for 28 yards. right? Austin Eckler, Zach Ertz getting a majority of the work in that passing game because of Vic Fangio's scheme shutting down those outside receivers. So, Vic Fangio, former Denver Broncos head coach, your familiarity with him throughout his decades in the league. What is it about his game plan tonight, or maybe that you've seen from the Eagles overall, that has them humming at this point in the season?
Well, for me, Alex, they got everyone involved from the front end to the back end. And they're just trying to mix up their coverage. And the Eagles, they don't run a lot of man coverage. They rely heavily on their front being able to get pressure and force some turnovers. They run too high. They run cover 3, cover 4. And what they try to do, they try to force you into mistakes. We saw tonight where the Eagles were able to create some turnovers by utilizing their safeties, dropping them down, and acting as a Roberts. The one thing they did great against Jaden Daniels, who, when he gets the ball in his hands, he likes to get outside on the perimeter of the defense, like most quarterbacks decide to do. But they did a great job of trying to limit those big plays and force him into some error throws. And over the past 2 weeks, he's been sacked 6 times, 3 times a game, and that is becoming issues for the Washington Commanders. But Vic Fangio and the Eagles had a great game plan coming in tonight. They executed well. They communicate, which always is a big issue when you are playing a team or any team at home because of the crowd noise. But that was one of the things that kind of got them over the hump. And they were able to find ways, in the game to kind of put, Jaden Daniels on his heels. And a couple of them times, Jaden Daniels started reverting on some bad habits that I hadn't seen in a while. And that's throwing his back foot. That's why he's missing a lot of throws. And when you play the quarterback position, think about Patrick Mahomes being able to throw from different arm angles. And tonight, the arm angles were not there for Jaden Daniels because the footwork wasn't there tonight.
So they've lost back-to-back games now. The Steelers and the Eagles, they're, going to get, let's say, a good remedy, being able to host Dallas week 12 and then the Titans week 13 before that week 14 bye. So are you necessarily worried about their stretch here, losing to 2 quality teams? Again, one of the best in the NFC, the Pittsburgh Steelers, one of the best in the AFC in their own right. Or is this kind of a rookie quarterback who's now played 11 straight weeks of football, especially tonight on short rest? I know the Eagles had that as well, but a rookie who doesn't have their bye until week 14. Do you sort of buy into fatigue that comes in as you're acclimating to your first NFL season? Or, hey, Jaden Daniels played 5 years at 2 colleges, and he's been essentially a professional up to this point.
No, I'm not going to buy into that because everything that we've seen from Jaden Daniels is proven that, when Washington took him, they took him for a reason. The skill sets are there, and just unfortunate you run up against teams that are better than you from a talent standpoint. I mean, look at Dan Quinn's defense, right? They gave up a lot of yards against Saquon Barkley. You go back a couple of weeks and you say, well, when they were playing the Chicago Bears, the same thing happened with DeAndre Swift. It's the idea of guys being where they need to be and making the tackles when they need to make the tackles. So this is not kind of an overreaction for me because, look, here in Denver played Baltimore and played Kansas City. 2 teams that are playing well. Kansas City is kind of a toss-up, but they know how to win. And that's how I look at the Philadelphia Eagles. So same thing is for the Eagles. I mean, for the Commanders. You're facing 2 teams in back-to-back weeks that are better than you. They know how to finish because think about how Washington lost against Pittsburgh, not being able to finish on either side of the ball. Tonight, they couldn't get their offense going, and then they let the ground game of the Philadelphia Eagles take over with Saquon Barkley. So this is not an opportunity or the time to kind of have that knee-jerk reaction or panic and say, well, Jaden Daniels may have had success early at the beginning of the season, but he's just another rookie quarterback that's struggling. No, I'm not going to buy into that because we all know some nights are yours and some nights are your opponents, and tonight was the night.
Well, we will see the Philadelphia Eagles on NBC. They've got Sunday Night Football, Week 12, traveling to where I am in Southern California to face the Rams before going to Baltimore, which will be really, not just John Harbaugh hosting what was formerly his team that he was the special teams coordinator for, but a battle of truly one of the best in the AFC against one of the best in the NFC. So that'll be exciting once the calendar rolls to December. Nick, can't believe I'm saying that, just 2 NFL weeks away from now. We have an exciting week 11, not to get too far into the sauce for week 13. Week 11, nonetheless, Nick, it kicked off with what kind of was a lousy game to start, but finished out all right based on Saquon Barkley's heroics in the fourth quarter. But Nick, correct me if I'm wrong. If you started your NFL Sunday this weekend with the Steelers and Ravens, you follow that with the Chiefs and the Bills in the afternoon, and cap things off with the Bengals and Chargers on Sunday Night Football. Could you pick 6 teams that you'd rather watch go head to head and spend your entire Sunday watching? I mean, is week 11, am I allowed to build the expectation, or is it not going to deliver just based on how good these teams have been, how good these teams in particular, the division matchup in the morning, and the Chiefs and the Bills, the 8th time that they've played in the last 5 years? Can the expectation, can it deliver based on how these teams have played so far this year?
Well, that is what the NFL and the individuals who made the schedule, that's what they're hoping. Because when you think about Baltimore, now, then the back half of their schedule, they're going to face a lot of teams within their own division. And that's going to make everything really exciting, because now you're trying to figure, well, how the seeding is going to break down. Who's going to be the number one seed right now? Obviously, it looks as though Kansas City is definitely that team, but things can change over a couple of weeks. Going back to Buffalo. Buffalo has historically had a problem with Patrick Mahomes in Kansas City, right? Whether they were traveling to Arrowhead or the Chiefs were traveling to Buffalo, it's just one of those things. And Josh Allen and the Buffalo Bills have to prove that not only can you get past the Kansas City Chiefs in the regular season, but can you do it in the postseason, right? All of those things are on the table. You think about the Bengals and the Chargers. Both of those teams are the Chargers are trying to hold their position, number 2 position behind Kansas City, and Cincinnati is trying to keep pace because they have the Broncos themselves and the Colts all vying for that number 7 seed. So it's going to be important. I know here in Denver, we definitely going to be rooting for the Chargers in that one, which never usually happens. And this is great, because this is where we start to see teams start to separate themselves. Let's just say if this was baseball, usually around All-Star break, we see teams trying to put themselves in position for a late push. Right now, we're going to get a chance to see all these top teams vying for the number 1 seed, vying for top position in the playoffs. We get a chance to see all those teams and really what they're made of.
Let's zoom in, kind of maybe a couple bullet points or notes from each of those 3 games. When I look at the Ravens and the Steelers, for me, it's who's going to have the best rushing offense. On paper, you say, well, how about the number 1 offense in the NFL, right? The combination of Lamar Jackson, Derrick Henry, they're clearly the better rushing offense, but the Steelers' pass rush, which is suffering the loss of Alex Highsmith, who's going to miss a few weeks. You still have TJ Watt there, of course. You still have Cam Hayward there as well. I'm wondering if the Steelers can keep the Ravens off balance, or even just, the Steelers' running game can be efficient enough where they can keep Baltimore off the field. Does it come down, in your opinion, Nick, to the running game, or are you looking for Lamar and Russell to be battling out for just making one more big play than the other quarterback?
Well, the run game is rather fascinating, and you have to tip your cap to the Baltimore Ravens and say, well, advantage Ravens, because Derrick Henry is a monster. He's proven he's a monster, and I still don't understand why the Titans let him go, but yet I digress. So for me, it is going to be how well does Russell Wilson and that offense actually find rhythm early, because they have struggled too as of early, but come on late. Mike Williams caught a touchdown last week,
Mhm.
and he tweeted something about staying off or on the red line, which I'm happy that he did. But this is what it's going to come down to. To be totally to be totally honest with you, how well will the Steelers play against the Ravens secondary that has struggled mightily against the pass? The Broncos couldn't really get a lot going there, but looking at what's happened with George Pickens, obviously you got Pat Freiermuth and you have Mike Williams as well. So that's where I'm going to lean more towards. If the Steelers are able to move the ball down the field efficiently and effectively, and those moon balls that we know that Russell is known for, if he's throwing moon balls, we may have to call Neil Armstrong to help out.
Well, let's see if that if that Steelers offensive line can buy Russ the amount of time, and George Pickens does George Pickens type things, and all of a sudden they can go shot for shot with the Baltimore Ravens. Let's see. At this point in time, the Buffalo Bills still kind of ironing out their offense as well compared to the Kansas City Chiefs. We're still potentially a week away from Isaiah Pacheco returning. So the more efficient offense between the Chiefs and the Bills, I think, gets it done. On the defensive side of the football, who do you think has the advantage in terms of the front seven that can slow that running game?
Well, look, Kansas City in the Buffalo game obviously has a better front seven. If you want to look at the Steelers, Baltimore, I'll give the nod to the Steelers. Who else do we have? We have
we'll do Bengals and Chargers. We'll save for last.
Okay, but right there in those two teams, the Steelers and Kansas City, better defensive lines. And when you think about the Buffalo game against Kansas City, look at Buffalo's offense. I mean, not a lot of impact players. I mean, they have two talented tight ends, but Amari Cooper has missed the past 2 games because of a wrist injury. If he plays, then it changes the scenario just a little, because now when you really think about it, you have 2 wide receivers who are on different teams than they started, one in Newt Hopkins and one in Amari Cooper, right? Both essentially joining teams that could make a push for appearance in New Orleans. But for me, I just find that fascinating that you got 2 guys who were traded who are now find themselves facing off against one another. So I would love to see that. But once again, the nod goes to Kansas City defense and the Pittsburgh Steelers defense.
All right. So when we get to the Chargers and the Bengals, which was flexed into Sunday Night Football, listen, the Bengals have had one of the better offenses each of the last 2 weeks, but end up on the short end of the stick here. Can they get down into the mud with the type of game that the Chargers have been playing, emphasizing running the football, whether it's with J.K. Dobbins or, I guess, Justin Herbert, who's been snatching ankles based on the footage that we saw this past week?
Well, I trust the Chargers, oddly enough, not because, as here in Denver, we need the Chargers to win the game, kind of knock down the Bengals a couple pegs. But the biggest thing, the Bengals haven't been running the ball as well, right? And that's why they picked up Khalil Herbert from Chicago, hoping that could bolster their run game. But their bread and butter is Joe Burrow to Jamar Chase, right? If the Chargers can do what the Baltimore Ravens could not do, and I couldn't believe it that they could not do it. There's one guy out there who Joe Burrow trusts, and he's throwing to. He wears the number 1. He's wearing it for a reason, and somehow the Ravens defenders can't find him on the field to communicate to cover him. If the Chargers make that same mistake, they end up losing the game. And I'm thinking that the Chargers, they're not that stupid. Hopefully, well, that goes with what I'm saying. Hopefully they're not that stupid where they're going to find Jamar Chase and try to double him and force everyone else and Joe Burrow to beat them.
I'm really curious to see exactly how it all shakes out. And if, I had the pedometer or I had my step counter strapped to me, if I can, how many trips to the refrigerator on this Sunday can I get my 10K? Because I don't think there's going to be a whole lot of game action I want to miss from this Sunday. We'll see how it stacks up, right? We'll be here each week. but I'll just kind of keep a mental note wondering if we can top what Week 11 has to offer. Nick Ferguson, former 10-year NFL safety in the National Football League. I'm Alex Hardy. We are those guys. We hope to be your guys. And as always, Nick, we tend to close things out on this program by asking something for Nick. Nick, before we split, I had something in the can I think I wanted to ask about Bo Nix, but we're going to pivot instead because I never give you the opportunity to talk about your Denver Broncos. However, in support of my wife's Fighting Irish, I got to find out if this is Audric Estime's week. Kind of tell me this Sean Payton process of weeding out the guys he didn't draft and filtering in his guys. Listen, 5-5, I think, is a bit of a surprise, but Sean Payton, nonetheless, is going to do what he does. Should I get excited about Estime? He was basically a bowling ball with knives, was what I would compare his running style to at Notre Dame. Listen, when he had Michael Mayer there and he had, other, with the exception of Joe Alt, I'll just say that Estime was the best player on Notre Dame's offense each of the last 2 years prior to getting drafted by Denver. But, I'm interested to see kind of how this fits, not just him, progressing in the National Football League. But, Nick, let's zoom out. Like, this is just a Sean Payton thing, right? We're not playing the rookies because we're giving up on the season at 5-5, are we?
Well, I hope that's not the case because that was the narrative last year with Russ Wilson.
Oh, sure. Let's do that again.
Well, here's what I would say. There are some rumblings that some moves are going to be made and Estime is going to get more carries. And what was phenomenal is that, like, this season, we've seen Courtland Sutton have 2 back-to-back 100-yard games. We've also seen Courtland Sutton now get a target in a Thursday night game. And when you fast forward, you rewind rather to the Kansas City game. So you had Javonte Williams on the field, right? He only got 1 carry. He was on the field, but he only got 1 carry, which is wild considering that going into the Kansas City game, he was kind of the bell cow guy because Estime had somehow found himself in Sean Payton's doghouse.
Sure.
Because ball security was a huge issue. And I can tell you, right, being around Bill Parcells, which Sean Payton himself was around, Parcells would always say, a running back that puts the ball on the turf consistently is someone else's running back, right? So we don't really know how this, I guess, Estime experience is going to work because the moment Estime puts the ball on the turf, here's what Sean Payton's going to have to do. The guy who only received 1 carry last week, he's going to have to turn around and say, Javonte, now you're my guy. And how does Javonte bounce back from that? Where I would expect for Javonte to run angry and run pissed off because he has been the catalyst for this offense. Like, there are 2 people who are actually leading the Broncos in the past games in rushing. Bo Nix is 1. You look at Javonte being 2. Who's leading the Broncos in receptions and yards? Courtland Sutton and Javonte Williams. So how do you sit Javonte in that situation knowing what those numbers are? I have no idea. I will not pretend to be Sean Payton, but all I know is that Audric Estime, bless his heart, he runs hard, but if he puts the ball on the turf, he's going back to the doghouse.
Making Sean Payton's decision all that much easier. Denver hosting the 6-4 Atlanta Falcons. Kirk Cousins coming over, and also still Denver native Justin Simmons with the Broncos let go of this offseason. This was the line that I wanted to share with you, Nick. This was the quote from Courtland Sutton. I texted him, referring to Simmons, hey, bro, when I come over the middle of the field, just remember, we're still friends.
What? No. That's not how this works, right? Never once when I wore a different uniform, being a Jet and seeing guys from Buffalo, or becoming a Bronco and seeing guys who play for the Jets, or becoming a Texan and seeing guys who play for the Broncos. No, we're in different uniforms. See, we are friends only 2 times in the game, before and after. During, I don't know you, man. I don't know you, right? And for Justin, for Cortland rather, to text Justin and say, hey, man, act as though you know me. What if I am Justin, I'm saying, wait a minute. Did Cortland just give me an idea of what the game plan might be? Him coming across the middle, running dig routes? Oh, yes. If you reach up, I'm sauteing all these ribs. Yeah, like bubblegum shrimp, barbecue ribs, mustard ribs, all types of ribs. I'm eating them all up like James Winston.
Cortland Sutton's ribs going to be at Elway's Steakhouse later that night, courtesy of Justin Simmons. He's Nick Ferguson. We are those guys, courtesy of him, 10 years NFL experience, as well as myself, Alex Hardy. Nick, I'm excited for Week 11. Clearly, we've devoted time to it. The Philadelphia Eagles, of course, kicking things off with the 26-18 victory over their NFC East division rivals in Washington. So, Nick, when I talk to you next week, we're going to be approaching Week 12, moving on clearly to the back half, but certainly money-making time for a lot of these teams. So, Nick, let's get on out of here. What do you have to say to the people?
Anytime you eat ribs, make sure you have the proper napkin to wipe it up.
Just hands.
No, that's too messy, man. That's just napkin.
Bring the beard back, little flavor saver.
No, man. Look, hey, we're not Neanderthals. We use napkins.